American sporting icon.
Oh, that's a cracking right hand she has there.
Wow.
You're talking about the best female boxer that ever lived.
Katie Taylor is the champion of the Olympic Games.
You know, what's gone on with her life, that's something really I've talked about.
There wasn't a day where I didn't wake up thinking about the Olympics.
Women's boxing at the time wasn't even allowed in the country. I had to pretend to be a boy to get fights.
Pete was the sort of glue that held Katie together.
We're like best friends, to tell you the truth.
Rio Olympics around the corner and she was expected to win the gold medal again.
Can't wait for Katie to win gold for Ireland.
So only a few months out from the Olympics, the relationship between Katie and my dad started to become a bit more fractured.
My dad was no longer someone who I could work with, really.
The trust was broken.
No club, no coach, and getting ready for the Olympic Games.
She's beaten. Katie Taylor is beaten and out of the Olympic Games.
Katie, give me your reaction.
It was just such a drop that it had to be something traumatic that happened to her.
The Katie Taylor that we've seen in the ring is not the same Katie Taylor I know.
Is there more in Katie Taylor?
I knew that wasn't the end of my career.
Katie Taylor has signed a professional contract.
She's still fighting to get recognition.
I believe she's not prepared for what is coming on Saturday.
Can she win a world title?
I'm going to go all the way to the very top.
This is where we find out a lot about Katie Taylor. It's Katie Taylor!
Yeah, that is the trailer for Katie. It's out next Friday in cinemas, and I'm delighted to say the director of Katie, Ross Whitaker, joins me in studio. Ross, how are you?
Good, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
How does it feel watching that? It's some body of work you put in, and I guess it gets all compressed into that 2-minute package there for promotional purposes.
Yeah, we were just looking at the trailer on your screen here, and I was just saying to you, like, it's actually it's mad to watch it. You get so emotionally invested when you make these films, and especially with someone like Katie, who's kind of such an interesting person, but like, I suppose she's just such a compelling person, you know, and you just get really emotionally invested in telling the story. And then when it's finished, it's kind of like this release. And it's kind of a bizarre feeling to be putting it out into the world then for other people to watch, because it's been amongst yourselves, you know, either with filming with Katie or working with the editor, Andrew Hearn, and the other members of our team. And then you come to this moment and you're like, it flies, you know, or you hope it does. So it's kind of an odd time, an odd experience to be at this stage.
You mentioned the emotion that goes into this and the attachment with Katie throughout this. Explain to us when you started this project, and pitching it to Katie, I'd imagine, wasn't exactly the easiest task, because as we can see from the movie, she's not exactly a person who likes to kind of tell her story to the world. She doesn't like preach from the mountaintop too much, unlike a lot of boxers.
Yeah, and I suppose that's always been a part of boxing is, you know, we've started using this term trash talk more recently, but that idea of speaking out and I suppose trying to sell tickets through bravado, but and that dates back, decades, as we all know. But Katie is a fascinating character without necessarily being a colourful character. You know, and she's incredibly quietly charismatic, which is one of the first things I realised when I got to spend the first little bits of time with her. Is like, she's so charismatic and without saying anything. And that's one of the big things, one of the big challenges, like how do you transpose it onto the screen? You're just trying to witness being with her and get that across to people. And people say that they're getting it. Hopefully they are. Going back to how it started, I would be good friends with Brian Peters, her manager of many years. I would be friends of many years, and he became her manager kind of in the next couple of months after Rio, when she was thinking about going pro and ultimately decided to go pro. And Brian and I had a couple of conversations about it, and then we sat down with Katie and discussed it. And it turned out that Katie had kind of always been interested, or had for some time been interested in a documentary, because I think possibly, you know, she feels like her story should be documented in some shape or form. And it just had never worked out. People had actually filmed a little bit with her in the past, and it just hadn't felt right. It hadn't been the right kind of chemistry. And my approach to things, I suppose, is quite fly on the wall, or I sort of call it witnessing. You know, you want to witness the story as it happens. And we kind of felt that would work better for her, you know, to just kind of be there, to kind of gauge for her as more of an introverted person when was enough, you know, when to push it and when not to push it, when you could develop aspects of interviews or parts of her story, and when it was better just to let her have a break from it, you know what I mean, for a little while. and we seemed to hit on. It just seemed to naturally hit right between the two of us, you know, because I'm probably more of an introvert as well, and I understand like she gets a lot of her energy by spending time on her own.
Yeah.
You know, like a day and a half, 2 days before a fight, she will not leave her hotel room. Like she's building the energy. Like that's how the introvert builds the energy. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Conor McGregor, for example, you know, he gets energy from being out there and amongst people and so on and so forth. Just like polar opposite personality-wise. So it was important, I suppose, to keep that in mind and not be trying to make Katie into something that she wasn't. Try instead to let her be who she is and realise that that's as compelling, that she's as interesting a character as someone who wants to speak out all the time. So that was kind of the approach.
You say you've been working on it for just over 2 years. So if you start this before or after Rio?
So what are we now? We're in 2018. So we finished the edit in July. So actually it was under 2 years. I told you that wrong when we were watching the trailer. But yeah, we started just late October, I think. So it was about 2 months after Rio, just in the build-up to that first fight that she had. It was great that it came together really quickly because you want to be there at the start. And then we finished editing it in mid-July, having filmed her fight with Bustos as kind of part of a chapter at the end. So what's that? I suppose about 20 months or so, yeah.
Because post-Rio is an incredibly brave time for Katie Taylor to say, yeah, this is the time when I want to start this documentary.
It's incredible in retrospect, you know, the bravery that she would have to go, no, I'm going to do this, you know, and I think that, well, first of all, I suppose we had conversations about it. I explained how it would work and so on, and that obviously chimed with her, but I think, you know, she has this quiet confidence that things will work out in the end. You know, there will be setbacks and there will be obstacles, but things will work out in the end. And we explained to her why this was a great time to start, because, like, you know, it's intriguing. A comeback story is always intriguing, you know, and you need to be in at the base level, the ground level, to go on that journey that hopefully goes upwards, you know, with some difficulties along the way and so forth. But she just bought into it, and I'm delighted. I think this film's kind of important. You know, it's important to have been able to document someone as noteworthy as Katie is, and who's kind of a legend of sport, and to be able to kind of have that document there into the future, because I think it'll be something that people will look back upon when they think of Katie Taylor in the future. Yeah,
like Rio is such an important part of her career, and it's not going to be the thing that defines her, but it is one of the things that we can view in the documentary that is part of the definition of her character. Like, for example, well deep into her professional career, it's before she wins a title, but like actually about 4 or 5 fights into her career, she is saying things like, Rio, I still haven't got over it. It's still something that I feel deeply saddened by with every single day, which is an incredible statement and an incredible picture of the character that Katie Taylor is. Like, the one-dimensional view we get of the post-fight interview on RTE when it's quite raw, I think a lot of us thought that would have been a fleeting feeling like most other athletes, but not for Katie Taylor.
Yeah, well, even up to the present day, I'm pretty sure she thinks about it every day, you know, and I think that's something that's part of what's driving her. You know, I think there's a lot more to come from Katie Taylor. A lot of people don't realise what fights are out there for her. Like, there's going to be a year or two of some pretty exciting stuff, and Rio will always be part of her story. You're right, you know. But I think that as she goes on to do more things, there's going to be all these different chapters to her career. And, you know, she would never say that Rio was good for her, you know, or in some way helped her career. But that's not to say that it hasn't, you know, driven her on to do more. It's not to say that it hasn't maybe developed parts of her personality. You know, she had to go out on her own. She moved to the States on her own. Someone that had lived her whole life in the bosom of her family, you know, with her mum making her meals and her dad organising her training and their trips and so on and so forth, like, made that big a decision because she believes that what she's doing, well, it's so important to her. And then obviously it has other ramifications for female sport, or to inspire any person. I mean, look what we've seen during the week with all the young women, teenage girls who won all these medals. Like, that impact is massive, and she knows that. Like, she, even outside of our social media and media bubbles, like, she's getting that kind of feedback all the time, the significance that her success has for other people.
What was the single biggest thing you learned about Katie Taylor's character when you go on this journey with her from a low point in Rio to a high point of becoming world champion?
Yeah, I think it's something we touched on already. I think it's her bravery, like, one, her bravery in taking this on, but also Katie when she does something, it's 100%. You know, she doesn't do things by half. And when she said she was going to be open in the documentary, when she said she was going to give access, you know, we see Katie in some, you know, breaking down in this film. We see Katie in some emotional moments in this film, and she didn't shy away from that. You know, like just like, you know, maybe another athlete, like other athletes have pulled out of Olympics for less. Do you know what I mean? Like Katie will always front up, and in the film she does it as well. And she said to me to start, I want it to be the truth. I want it to be raw if it has to be raw. If we're going to do it, let's do it properly. And we could agree on that, obviously. So that's what I've learned about her, is that she just is someone that is unfailingly honest and a person of her word. And if she says she's going to do something, I've filmed with people in the past where you agree everything and then on the day their phone is off. You know what I mean? Any media person or filmmaker has probably had that experience. But with Katie, it's not like that. If she says she's going to do something, she'll do it.
The honesty obviously comes through very well when she speaks about her father in the documentary, and it's quite a candid moment for her. It's quite a candid moment for her mother in terms of how they speak about the whole situation. And she speaks about how her father had an affair, basically, and that is why the whole relationship broke down.
I think that she said that her dad decided to step away from the family. Those are words that Katie used, because she almost has her own vernacular at times. But yeah, I mean, it's absolute devastation, and you can see that in the film. And it's a little bit different for Katie. I think, you know, Pete was such a brilliant coach to her and mentor to her, and so close to her as her father, that it wasn't just the normal impact for someone of one of their parents leaving a relationship. It was the double impact of, you know, the two things that were closest to her in her life, her family and her boxing. Like, those are the two priorities. Any third priority in Katie's life is way behind those two priorities. Like, that's what's so important to her. I mean, apart from obviously her devotion to Christianity, which is another, you know, big pillar of her life, obviously. But to have those things taken away from you, and also the timing of them, like, utterly devastating. And I think we see that in the film. We understand a lot better why things went so astray for her, and how hard it must be to pick yourself up from that.
Yeah.
You know?
It's also how hard it must be for her to ever muster some sort of forgiveness, because one of the very closing scenes, I think you kind of finish up around January, February this year with her. Yeah. She says she's just spoken to her father, and that was the first time since, you know, everything that we now know did happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, January 2018 was kind of the last interview, and then we filmed a little bits of her upcoming fights as kind of final chapters with Bustos winning the title, just because you kind of feel like the film has to be as up-to-date as it humanly can be. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of private matters for Katie to a certain extent. Like, yeah, she was touching base with her dad around that time, and I think what she says in the film, that, you know, at that moment, and honestly, I finished filming with her at that point, so I'm not really sure what happens beyond that in both of their lives. But, you know, they're building bridges, and it's something that I think anyone can kind of recognise, is that, like, your parent is your parent, and you always love them, you know, and I think that certainly that's something that at that point in her life she was looking at, you know. But I honestly don't know what happens beyond that. But yeah, I think it was incredibly tough time for her, and it's something that will always be a low point in her life. Yeah.
For sure. Like, it's interesting just kind of throughout this conversation, like in your very first answer, making the comparison with Conor McGregor and the brash nature of it all. And I always think with Katie Taylor that there's just a deep level of confidence, that there isn't kind of a whole layer of insecurity around Katie Taylor, that she is as confident as Conor McGregor is, but she channels it in very different ways. But at the same time, there's some elements in the documentary which kind of maybe disprove that to a certain extent. Like, she's incredibly hard on herself. Like, after the Nina Manka fight, she's asked by Ross, how would you rate that fight? And I think he was saying like a 7 out of 10, and he would be harsh. And she's like, nah, 5 out of 10. And not even sort of being modest about it, being really self-critical.
Yeah, almost, you know, to a fault. I think that she's so hard on herself. And even I know, like, other members of her family feel like she's too hard on herself, and that, you know, try to enjoy it a little bit more. Like, she's absolutely driven. And her brother Peter told me a story, didn't end up in the documentary, but, you know, they were at a school sports day, and Katie was doing the 100 metres. I think she was quite quick, you know, in those kind of events, and won, like she did in every sport, won loads of stuff. But you know, all of the other girls in the lead up to the race were chatting amongst each other. They'd obviously seen each other at other events and so on and so forth. And Katie was off at the side on her own crying because she was so nervous and so determined to win. Like, there's something obviously in that has made her the champion that she is. Like, she gets incredibly nervous. Like, the week or two before a fight, it's always a very tough time for her, I think. Ultimately, she just wants to get in the ring. But I don't know if that's the same as the confidence thing. You know, I wonder if it's just such a desire to win and to perform that that desire is so great that it almost is overwhelming.
A quest for perfection, and the end goal might never arrive in that quest for perfection, or maybe it will. I don't know.
I don't know. Like, she does recognise that she has performed better in some fights than others. I mean, despite some hilariously bad reporting, like, she fought Jessica McCaskill in London that time, and Jessica's gone on to win a title since. But, like, it was a masterclass of boxing, you know, and you know, you talked to her after that fight and she'd be happy with some of the things that she had done, but I think she always thinks she can do better, you know. And when you see her in training, see some of the things she does and the speed at which she does some of the things, you know that it would be hard to even transpose all of those things in the ring. But, like, if it ever does click where everything is right, it's going to be spectacular to watch, because she's just like an incredible technician, very talented and so dedicated athletically as well.
Well, maybe it is a sign of confidence, actually, now that I said what I said, that she knows that she can do better, and that her confidence tells her that, you know, the performance that I'm doing and putting out in the ring at the moment just isn't where it can be, and she does have that confidence to go on and push herself further. And who knows, maybe we will see another peak of Katie Taylor, maybe this weekend, maybe in the following fights. I did want to ask you, though, it kind of ties in with all of this, just in terms of some very interesting quotes from the likes of Eddie Hearn and from Katie Taylor and from Ross, her coach, as well, about the idea of promotion, because the pro game is one of the most fascinating chapters in the documentary. Like, she says she's got no interest in padding her record. Eddie says the problem with Katie is that she constantly wants to be challenged. She seemed offended almost by Jessica McCaskill and that call-out video with the milk bottle. And Ross, her coach, says, you want to be exciting, but you got to be smart too. Right after Eddie Hearn says, we can't afford fights that aren't entertaining. So there is this sort of conflict here between the lack of a loudmouth in Katie Taylor, but these performances that were so exhilarating that in some of the commentary you play in the documentary, you forget that how surprised the professional boxing world was by how entertaining Katie Taylor was as a fighter and how ruthlessly she disposed of some of her opponents. Yeah,
well, she wants to do the entertaining in the ring. Yeah. And that's why she's so hard on herself. Like, she wants every fight... Look, this is my opinion. You know, I'm not saying that Katie is specifically saying this, but this is what I garner from watching her, is that she wants every fight to be exciting. She wants to show the level of skill that she has. She wants people to be wowed and to want, like, she knows that to have a career in this, people are going to have to want to watch her. So, and I think she knows that she has a lot to offer. So I think that's what she's looking at. It's not really about doing the trash talk before the fight. It's more about, like, showing people what she's capable of. And if they see that, then they'll realise that it's worth watching and continue to support her. And some of the performances are incredible, you know, and boxing's always a tough one because they say, like, styles make fights, and sometimes you can do everything right and the opponent makes you look bad or whatever it might be. But, like, I think that what Katie wants to do is make every fight exhilarating, and she's going in there, and I think what Ross is probably getting at is, like, you know, you don't have to go in at 100 miles an hour in the first round, you know, pick your moment. You've got 10 rounds to kind of break this person down or whatever it might be. So, but yeah, she's definitely wants to entertain. Like, she loves watching boxing. She loves entertaining fighters, but really, I think more so, in my opinion, watching her, it's that she wants to do that more so in the ring.
Katie Taylor's future is fascinating, like what she does after boxing. And we can talk about character development in this documentary because it was filmed over such a long period of time. In a very strange way, that the character, if I can call it that developed in the most unique way when I watched it was actually the town of Vernon in Connecticut. Like, the way I viewed it at the start as a sort of very lonely place that I wouldn't like to live in, that I might have perceived that Katie Taylor didn't particularly enjoy living in. By the end of the documentary, it's not that she's at peace with it. She kind of realises that this is a fantastic place for her. She's chatting to people in the community. It feels more like a home. That this, I don't know, this monk life existence, even though it's not quite monk life, it's not that remote, but there is something poetic about it that really suits Katie Taylor. That really, there's elements of it that are down to earth in kind of playing with her personality.
It is. There isn't much in Vernon, honestly. It's quite a remote, kind of quiet little town, and that probably suits Katie in some ways, but no one can survive without friends some of the time. And I think the first trip I went over to her, she was incredibly isolated. I can't speak to her level of loneliness, but it certainly seems like a lonely existence. And I know that her family were really concerned about that aspect of going and living your own in the States. So, but she has developed friendships and so on and so forth, and certainly made it easier for her. But I tell you one interesting thing about that, like when I spoke to her about that, I said, like, it's great. Like one of the last days I was in Vernon with her, we were driving in the car, and I sort of said to her, God, it's great that this is kind of working out, because you feel like this is a person that's gone, has kind of probably maybe even evolved a little bit as a person over the course of this kind of 18 months. You've seen them grow up a little bit. They've gone out on their own, all those kinds of things that...
Like cooking for themselves.
Yeah, cooking, flying the nest, all those things. But I said to her, it's really brilliant that this has kind of worked out. Like, that you've made friends, that, you're just getting to know the place better. Her cooking has not improved, she says. She's just found better restaurants. But she said to me, she's like, yeah, it's great. And she goes, but even if it hadn't, I'd still be here, because this is the place I have to be to achieve my goals. Like, again, it's like the priorities are like winning boxing matches. Yeah. Friendship, comes behind that. Like,
tells you everything.
Yeah, it is. And like, I kind of couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? I thought she'd just be like, yeah, it's great. It's like, yeah, it's great, but this is where I have to be if I'm going to win. And I do think the future is like...
What's she going to do after boxing?
Oh, after boxing, that's...
in your view, like, she hasn't decided.
Yeah, it's a tough one. First of all, I think she's got a lot to do in the ring. Like, you'd love to see her do... you don't want her to go on too long. Like, that's always the story, isn't it, with boxers? You don't want them to go on too long. But, if she has a year or two more and fights some of these fights like Serrano, Brackus, Pursoon, like, there's huge fights out there for her, and it's only going to get bigger. And other, like Mosley, the Olympic champion, has gone pro. Like, she's a couple of fights in, and she's a phenomenal athlete. So there's massive fights for Katie down the road, and I think people are going to start waking up to that. But beyond that, I don't think she's really even thought about it. But one thing I noticed is that in the company of kids, like anytime she does a signing, anything like that, like there's this unbelievable rapport that she has with kids, and they're amazingly inspired by her. But she also like interacts with them differently than she does with adults. This really comes naturally to her. And it's funny because she says in the doc, like, I don't think I'd ever want to have kids. I don't know if it's kind of, if she's being flippant or not, but like when she's with kids, it's phenomenal seeing the connection. And you just think like this person has such a role as an inspiration to kids, as a mentor to kids, as a role model to kids. And we've already seen, as we were talking about, some of the success that people have had in her wake. You'd feel like that would be a really natural thing for her to move into. How exactly, I'm not sure, but I definitely think that she's got a lot to offer in that respect.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ross, it's absolutely fantastic. Congratulations on it. It's out next Friday in Irish cinemas?
October the 26th, yeah, Friday, October 26th.
Ross Whitaker, thank you so much for popping into the studio.
Thanks a million. Thanks for having me.